Hello, thank you for joining us today. My name is Mahi, and I'm here to present a digitally automated multi-partner B2B system for vendors that provides a seamless integration of B2B EDI with ERP systems. Businesses at every enterprise level invest a consequential amount of resources in the form of time and capital to advertise their products and services. However, the finalization of a sales transaction is followed by a set of complex actions like acknowledgements, shipment confirmations, and receipts. In the present economy, these transactions are occurring in thousands between hundreds of vendors and customers. Every transaction is recorded and managed differently in different ERP systems. This calls for a modern digital infrastructure that can streamline the automation of the different stages that together ensure that the sales order is successfully fulfilled. The Teqtron team has designed a one-stop, end-to-end integrated solution that not only standardizes how this transaction information is exchanged between a vendor and their customers, but also provides a visual resource to catch and correct errors, manage access to this information, and provide analytical insights that can help drive critical business decisions. At a high level, the solution is composed of two major components: an integration system employing a middleware and a UI application. This recommended B2B solution currently caters to different file formats such as EDI, XML, JSON, and CSV for prominent transaction sets such as 850, 855, 856, 860, and 870, and has been successfully integrated with the order management module of Oracle EBS and the SAP ERP with Boomi as the middleware. This system can be modified to adapt to various other middlewares such as Oracle SOA and MuleSoft, and can be expanded to any transaction set in the order fulfillment segment of the O2C cycle. Let's begin with an introduction to the overall architecture of the current version of the recommended B2B solution. As displayed, this transaction information is bidirectional and is trafficked from the customer to the ERP system and vice versa using a middleware. The UI wrapper around this integration system has been designed and developed in Next.js and Java Spring Boot to enable fast rendering of large datasets. For an inbound transaction where vendors are receiving information, the customers share the sales order data via a data transport layer such as an SFTP server. For outbound transactions, the customers collect the outbound files from the data transport layer. The architecture of our current integration design comprises mainly of three blocks: the data transfer block, a middleware block, and the ERP system. The customers place their inbound files in the data transport layer in any of the file formats between EDI, XML, JSON, and CSV. The current implementation is using the SFTP server for file transfer. However, the design can very easily accommodate any other protocol supported by the middleware, such as HTTPS, AS2, or blockchain. From the SFTP server, a scheduled integration process picks up these inbound transaction files. The received file undergoes certain validations and transformations within the middleware block as per the specifications provided by the trading partner. Finally, the middleware sends this transformed information to the ERP system. Within the ERP system, scheduled programs complete the processing of the inbound transaction with the help of ERP system provided APIs. For outbound transactions, which is exactly the reverse of inbound flows, scheduled programs within the ERP systems assemble relevant information from the ERP master tables so that they can be picked by the integration middleware. Once inside the middleware, this data is transformed and validated to be finally structured in the output file format expected by the trading partner. This outbound file is forwarded to the trading partner via the SFTP server or any other data transport layer. The architecture of a UI component comprises of two blocks: the front end, which is developed using Next.js, and the back end, which is developed using Spring Boot. Once either of inbound or outbound transactions are recorded within the ERP system with the help of the integration middleware, the backend component of the UI system can access these fields and forwards it to the front-end component, which is visible to the vendors. The UI component has been designed keeping in mind the nuances which arise with the management of large and bulk incoming and outgoing data. It has been developed to provide a user-friendly view of the transaction information and leverages server-side rendering and proxy APIs in Next.js for fast and secure access to the data. Spring Boot, on the other hand, bolsters enterprise-level scalability for the application. Our team has worked extensively to devise an identity and access management system that provides vendors with the ability to control access to the transaction information at a very granular level. As a part of the comprehensive UI design, some features that are available to vendors in the UI application are an identity and access management system that controls which user views, edits, or approves changes to the sales order data. A tabular representation of the different transaction sets with editable fields for error data, which can be corrected and submitted to the ERP system for reprocessing. The application displays item information in the form of nested expandable tables and provides column selection for the user to choose which fields are displayed on the table at both header and item level. The advanced search filter allows the users to filter table data based on a time range, customers, process statuses, and unique identifiers like sales order number and file names. The authentication for this application is secured by Spring Security and is managed using tokens. Our UI application also comes with a dashboard that shows the distribution of the accumulated data in the ERP system based on whether it has been successfully processed, is pending, has been updated, or has errors. This functionality can be expanded further to calculate and derive analytical insights about the volume and quality of data being processed by a system and generate relevant reports. Following this introduction to Teqtron's B2B automation system, let's move on to a short walkthrough of our solution for a cycle of 850, which is the purchase order and is an inbound transaction. For this walkthrough, our target ERP system is Oracle EBS, the middleware used is Boomi, and the data transport layer is the SFTP server. Beginning with the introduction to our identity and access management module, the module has three types of permissions. View permissions, which determine which users on the vendor side can view the transaction information for any of the transaction sets. Edit permissions, which determines if a user on the vendor side can make edits to the transaction data for any of the transaction sets. The edit permission can be controlled based on the transaction set, the customers the vendor has, and the transaction set fields that the vendor admin wants to allow the vendor user to update. And finally, the submit permissions, which determines if a user on the vendor side can approve or submit the updates made to any of the transaction sets data for reprocessing. Next, let's understand the steps that are included in the cycle of the B2B solution for the 850 transaction set. The following screen is a part of the IAM module available to admins in an organization. Here, we see the user profile of a user. We can see that the user has view permissions for 850 as well as the 856 transaction set. and edit permissions for one column, which is invoice to org, for all the customers for the 850 transaction set. On the next two screens are the four formats of 850 files which a vendor can receive from their customers. The customer purchase order numbers for each of these four files, as highlighted on the screen, act as identifiers for the respective transactions. A point to note here is that the CSV 850 file contains two purchase orders in the same file. Therefore, we will be creating 5 sales orders from 4 files. All these 4 files have been placed in the SFTP server and are ready to be picked by the Boomi integration process. Boomi, which is the middleware in the current version of the B2B solution, has an integration process scheduled to execute at fixed intervals. I am going to run the flow manually for this run-through. This process will pick any new files forwarded by customers to the SFTP server. As we can see, the process is successfully executed and we have 4 input files. These 4 input files are finally inserted into the Oracle EBS instance. Now, let's log into the user interface as the user with edit permissions for 850. Here, we can see the tabular representation of all the 850 data present in the custom EBS tables. Let's apply the filter to only display values for 4 customers who shared their inbound file for this run-through. The table shows the 5 purchase orders identifiable by their customer purchase order numbers coming from the 4 input files. We can see that the process status for all the 5 purchase orders is N, denoting a new record that hasn't been processed within the ERP system. We can expand every row to display the item elements associated with the purchase order. The user interface also has a column selection feature to choose which fields the user wants to display on the table. Let's hide the order date column and show the batch ID column since batch IDs are required in the next step. We note that the batch ID for the transactions is between 1037 to 1041. Now we can log out of this user account. The next step is the execution of a scheduled program within the Oracle EBS instance that validates all the fields of a purchase order against the master table values and an Oracle provided API that creates the sales orders from the purchase orders. For this run-through, I will be showing the manual execution of the otherwise scheduled program. We enter the batch ID range of the unprocessed records in the custom EBS tables, which was between 1037 to 1041. And submit the records for processing. Next, we view the output of the program and we can see that 4 out of 5 purchase orders are now successful sales orders. We can see the order numbers associated with the 4 customer PO numbers. The process status of these successfully processed records will be changed to S. We have one purchase order that failed to process and we can see the error message on the screen. Next, we check the user interface to view the successfully processed and the errored out transactions. We set the filter with the 4 customers and the batch ID range and view the tabular data. The process status of the 4 successfully processed records is now S and for the error transaction is E, with the process message column showing the cause of error. The purchase order fails due to a misspelled bill to org ID. As previously stated, this user has the permissions to edit fields of the errored out 850 transactions and therefore we can notice the edit and save action buttons that become visible for the error transaction. On clicking the edit button, the permitted columns become editable and we can update and save the bill to org ID for the error transactions and submit them for reprocessing. As we can see, the process status for updated transaction is now C, implying that the transaction has been updated. Now that the change has been made to the error transaction and the change has been submitted for review, let's log in as a user who has the permission to approve the update. As we can see, our demo submit user has the permission to submit changes made to the 850 transaction set. We set the filter with the 4 customers and the batch ID range and view the tabular data. We can see that the process status of the transaction that was edited is C and the submit button appears for rows that have been submitted for approval. On clicking the submit button, the updated field gets approved and the process status of the updated transaction changes back to N, indicating a new record ready for reprocessing on the next run of the scheduled program. Let's make a note of the batch ID for this transaction. The batch ID for this transaction is 1038. We will be needing this batch ID for the manual execution of the otherwise scheduled program. Now, let's enter the batch ID of the updated transaction for the execution of the program and submit the request. On viewing the log, we can see that the sales order has been created and the process status of the successfully created sales order can be verified in the user interface. On setting the filter with the batch ID range and the 4 customers in our use case, we can view the tabular data and verify that all the purchase orders have been converted to sales orders with unique order numbers and the process status S denoting the successfully processed transactions. This concludes the walkthrough of the 850 transaction set using our B2B solution. Outbound transactions such as 856, 855 and 870 are exactly the opposite in terms of flow from the inbound transactions. So what makes Teqtron's solution an excellent choice for order fulfillment and management? Let's review the key aspects of the suggested solution. The design for this B2B solution can be conflated with any available middlewares such as Boomi, Oracle SOA, and MuleSoft, and hence any file format supported by the chosen middleware. This gives customers the flexibility to record and communicate their transaction information in any file format, while it reduces the effort on the vendor side to track and manage this information. The solution design also has the scope to be integrated with either a third-party application using HTTPS or any other file transfer protocol that is supported by the middleware. This gives customers multiple channels through which this transaction data can be exchanged with the vendor. As mentioned before, our design has been successfully integrated with Oracle EBS and SAP ERP and can be very easily extended to any other ERP system on the vendor side. Depending on the middleware in use, the design can cater to any ERP system as per the trading partner requirements. The user interface wrapper around the integration system with the features that were described before, users get a user-friendly single point of access for all the stages of a transaction. Based on the business need laid down before you, the need for a system that can streamline the different aspects of sales order fulfillment has been clearly established. Together, the integration system using a middleware and the user application, Teqtron's digitally automated solution provides flexibility in terms of data exchange and management, simplicity in terms of information traceability, and control in terms of who has access to this data in context of viewing, editing, and submitting, making it an indispensable resource to rationalize the time invested on the set of actions that follow the closing of any successful sales order. If you or your organization would like the details about a recommended B2B automation solution, please contact us directly at contact@teqtron.com or give us a call at a Center of Excellence. If you feel that a more tailored and one-on-one approach is warranted, we are very excited and very happy to build out a POC and corresponding guide for your scope of work. If that is something you would be interested in, please reach out to us. At this time, this concludes our presentation. From all of us here at Teqtron, thank you very much for your time and we look forward to hearing from you soon.